The woke right are on the warpath once again. Alright. This time they're trying to cancel Justin Trudeau and Canada, the Canadian Parliament, for honoring a Ukrainian guy who fought in World War II against Russia. And yeah, I mean, it's about the dumbest thing where you can really see now the fruits of the propaganda these people have embraced with Putin, with denazification and Antifaization of right-wing politics, where these total cretins are willing to do anything to score any kind of maybe political points, or a hit to score a hit on the liberals. They'll do anything. These are the biggest lowlives. The typical right-wing, distant right thought leader is a grifter and is somebody who is in the body politic, resentful of everything, and just wanting to burn it all down. They don't care. They only want any opportunity, that will result in their own gain or maybe attention. But all the money they get and all the attention they get is not going for a good cause. It's not. This is the kind of right wing that we have today. Is just a total cretin. Not much different than like the people who stormed the Winter Palace. And it's I don't know. It really shows that you can't. When these people started to get huge into Putin and huge into the denazification war and all that, they didn't care when they saw like pictures and so forth of the Russian army, and wherever they occupied, they stopped people and they checked for patriotic tattoos, and if they find any tattoos, any kind of patriotic symbols or like Nordic runes or anything, you get a bullet in the head by the Russian army. And this kind of right winger didn't care, because these people have no principles. They're like little prostitutes. They're like angry little prostitutes who, I mean, and the frankly, the worst of these people are complete reprobate. These are degenerate people. The worst can be said about these people. Fairly, and they'll present evidence for it. I mean, for all the things they do when they say. None of it will be baseless on these people, on these right-wing thought leaders or whatever they present themselves as. And you see their behavior right now, where you have a guy, Canada has Zelenskyy speak, and they probably foolishly honor a 98-year-old guy who would have been how old in 1945, in a division that has no record of committing war crimes, and they're acting like this is like these people who otherwise are Holocaust deniers and so forth are acting like this guy ran Auschwitz, and they're trying to get him. They're actually trying to get like the Mossad and like Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the Polish government to like extradite this guy and like charge him with war crimes and to put him at the Nuremberg trial. And they're like they're saying every dumb thing that with every childish dumb thing of like the most twisted and moronic understanding of World War II. That's what you're seeing from the dissident right. That's what you're seeing from the pool of intellectuals that have all the historical revisionists who will tell you endlessly about wooden doors and how the Germans would never would never hurt any Jewish we wouldn't touch a Jewish hair on a Jewish person's head is how the dissident right will describe their I mean they go into all this stuff, and then some of these people make it like their life's work to, and I'm not kidding, if they're not Holocaust deniers, they'll basically make it their life's work to adjust the historical record to make it somewhat like palatable. They'll just like apologize to where like, they'll try to say, well, not all Germans were bad, or they might have. I mean, they'll go so far as to say, Hitler is the good guy or so, but typically they'll stop short at, just the Germans were reasonable in their defense on the Eastern Front and in the later years of the war. I mean, a lot of these, even that, but now it's all kind of. It's like you're watching these people throw their own legacies into a toilet or whatever. Like they could give a rip about all the stuff that they've said for however long. Where now it's completely unacceptable to them. Where even before it was okay. I mean, the guy that made our space program that was in the SS. So, I mean, he was like. We're not talking. Not everyone who, not all the people used to have maybe a more nuanced understanding, but even people who've been actual like war criminals, like the Ukrainian John Demyanuk, who was accused of being Ivan the Terrible from Treblinka, who may or may not have been, who was certainly at Sobibor. I mean, a lot of Americans at the time were sympathetic and were against the idea of like even someone like that of like deporting or like denaturalizing and sending these people to have like a war crimes trial, because the attitude of typical Americans and even has been that it's a war. And maybe these guys were our enemies or on the bad guy side in the war. But after it's over, to some extent, we can let bygones be bygones, and even maybe even some of the more horrible things we don't need to go into and like be sore over, because maybe both sides have. I mean that's the attitude. I remember growing up. That's kind of what people would say. I think a lot of people are familiar with the Demyanuk with Ivan the Terrible, but the attitude is now, in part, and certainly maybe in entirely, I guess, fueled by this idiotic political conception where these right wingers will act like how they perceive the worst elements of leftists behave to them. They'll figure they'll act the same, and and so they're creating this thuggish image that they can live up to or something, but they're acting like now if you were a volunteer, and keep in mind this guy joined a Ukrainian unit. Ukraine collaborated with the Germans largely because they'd been, massacred on a scale of millions by a communist regime of Russians, of Stalin, who liberals apologized for years. And so, who was there to support Ukraine back then? Um, there was the mainstream media actually wasn't sympathetic to Ukraine back then. Where the New York Times now is sympathetic to Ukraine, we could be thankful for that in a way. But at the time, back then, when the communists were starving all these people, New York Times is pulling in Pulitzer prizes for denying that atrocities were happening. And so yeah, the Ukrainians didn't have a lot of friends to turn to. They couldn't just vote for Ron Paul to as a viable option. They didn't have the Libertarian Party as a viable option. It was only they had Stalin starving them, and the rest of the world not caring, and the only people who really cared were Hitler's people. Hitler in his speeches talked about Ukraine, and when he got elected, and not that he really liked Ukrainians either. I mean, they didn't treat Ukraine. They had a complex and evolving relationship in the war, and even the collaboration with the two nations and the partnership, and in some way the friendship between the two nations in the war is complex. And maybe certain elements just wanted to completely destroy Ukraine. Later, maybe they changed their view. You can go into this, but either way, for starters, you at least should maybe know before you criticize the stuff the difference between OUN, OUNM, and OUNB, because some of these Ukrainians had, say, Bandera's people. They collaborated before Operation Barbarossa, where they were going in and these units, the Nightingale units with German intelligence, and they were like recon for Barbarossa and worked in different special operations capacities for the German Operation Barbarossa. That's Bandera's Ukrainians, and they expected that in doing this kind of help against the Soviet Union, that the Germans would help them make like a Ukrainian nation. And immediately it turned out after that wasn't going to happen. So the Germans arrested Bandera. His faction was the insurgent faction, and they weren't so much about collaborating with the Germans, because the Germans weren't they realized the Germans weren't really going to give them what they wanted. And so they were more insurgent, and they committed atrocities as well. And later, the Germans did go to them and glorified these guys, these Ukrainian partisans, these Ukrainian insurgents, as heroes, as freedom fighters. Later, the Germans were giving these guys weapons, because the Germans were getting chased out, because they didn't do, they weren't able to hold this ground. Well, then the OUNM, the non-Bandera Ukrainian nationalist faction, were the people who did things like join SS units, because the Germans had the Waffen-SS as like that's where their foreign legions were run. So they have French and Dutch and all these people from all these different occupied territories, wherever the Germans occupied. If they weren't going to just if they had any future in mind for the people there, they would maybe have them raise up a SS unit that would they would fight for their against communism. And actually most of these units would exclusively fight on the Eastern Front. So these would be typically crusade against Bolshevism type motivated people. And this isn't necessarily people who are thinking that they're joining because they're racist haters and anti-Semitic, and they don't even know about a lot of maybe they know about different atrocities, but maybe they don't. Either way, the context is totally different to act silly about. I mean, in the end, this is something where these kind of historical revisionists would spend their lifetime saying, hey, maybe someone who is being picked on by Stalin, who joins a SS unit in defense of his homeland, maybe he's just not a bad guy. Well, now it's the conservatives and the dissident right who are absolutely insisting that, actually that's a literal Nazi, a literal Nazi, an SS, and they're unwilling to entertain that this could be a more complex situation. I mean, at this point, you have to figure it's just about over for the historical revisionists, and what's the point? You spend your lifetime doing this stuff, then you just throw in with Putin for denazification propaganda and to pitch like a big bitch fit when liberals honor. I mean, imagine if the conservatives were different on the issue and weren't didn't just because the whole thing's driven by the right, which is really amusing. Where Trudeau's getting hit up for because the parliament honors this this guy who's a SS foreign legionnaire, and it's the right wing who, I mean, imagine if, say, they didn't kick up a big stink about it, and we're just willing to have a conversation. Imagine if they were on the Ukrainian side and there's no controversy. There's no one that was going to be upset about this. Where could that conversation have taken? Where could that national conversation have led to? I mean, I don't know. It really just kind of shows how that this kind of a right wing is just totally bankrupt and hopeless. That these people running it are they only want to, they're the type of people who will self-sabotage and would cripple the whole thing if it ever looked like they could be successful. That's why we have borders being completely overrun, because there is no right wing. It's just a bunch of numbskulls. Same thing in Europe. The people who say that they're a right wing thing are it's like a Putin financed groups who are completely ineffectual. And there's going to be no real resistance to it. There's no real voice here. It's just idiotic bluster. In this way, it's now it's just bluster that's even worse than liberals have ever behaved, because usually they don't get so dumb. I mean, however many when we made NATO, it was a lot of people who'd maybe fought for the Axis, who we were kind of turning against Russia again, because we were taking all these veterans and it seemed useful at the time, and nobody was really pitching a big bitch fit about it, let alone the right wing. Even when when they put a lot of SS guys on trial, there were Americans who were against it. The SS guys in Piper's unit who shot a bunch of U.S. troops at Melmedy. Americans were not really for prosecuting those guys. It became, in part because of Joe McCarthy, it became unpopular to prosecute those guys. And they'd shot American troops, GIs, But people figure it's a war. You need to get over it. They figured those guys weren't probably that much different than our guys. So, we wouldn't want our guys in a similar situation. If American troops were hosed down a bunch of German POWs, it's out of the question that we'd prosecute. We know we wouldn't do it. So that's some. Typically, we've had more mature attitudes that could kind of govern that. And looking back at this now, I mean, with the Cold War in the rearview mirror, with World War II along, you'd think we could maybe have a more mature. Russia's the enemy now. You could look at a Ukrainian who fought Russia. Okay, he fought Russia under a German command. That command was our enemy. But nevertheless, Russia was our enemy too, just after that. Go figure. So, in hindsight, that's cool. That guy, that's probably an interesting guy, is Yaroslav Hunka, who is the 98-year-old veteran who'd probably spent his whole life, with his wartime memories and so forth. And now he gets celebrated for a minute, and then the right wing, just this nightmarish kind of Bolshevized woke right, is just attacking this guy. For what? He served his people. What would they have done? What would they have told that guy that he should have done with Stalin's army? I mean, and frankly, it's a complex situation because I'm sure much more Ukrainians joined the Soviet army because they were sick of the Germans and how they treated them, and this includes Zelenskyy's grandfather. But nevertheless, it's people make decisions in the war. It goes one way that looking at this in hindsight, you could be a little more mature about it. You could, I mean, and the thing is that this kind of World War II history stuff has led to all kinds of political stuff. I mean, it's mattered more. People's interpretations of World War II has mattered more than a lot of other kind of political ideologies. So this stuff doesn't necessarily not matter. But it's interesting that it's now to the point where, because of the right wing, it's unacceptable. I'd imagine being a German of any sort would be unacceptable in that time period. Where typically, we used to kind of excuse people as, or at least just look at them as a vanquished, defeated foe who, were trying to get back on their feet and do whatever. You'd say the typical German soldier maybe is, it's not, we're not going to cancel you for being a veteran or something. Not necessarily that these guys didn't commit war crimes as well, but it's you need to kind of move on at some point. But I guess not. Either way, there's no war crimes that have been. It's not like Mr. Hunka is known to have committed war crimes where they're trying to extradite this guy. This division, the Galician SS division, is a division that was formed late in the war. Most of the war, the Germans were kind of against forming a big Ukrainian, these big Ukrainian formations. That's a division size, but they could have made a much larger, an entire Ukrainian army if things had gone differently. I'm sure they wish they did, looking back, but they didn't feel like they needed to. So late in the war, though, they raised up with the SS, an SS division, Galician, and these guys are pretty much fighting defensive battles on the Eastern Front with the Soviet juggernaut, just pounding their positions as they retreat all the way back, back to like the Czech. I mean, there's only so many. Like, this is also after really the bulk of the Holocaust. After, I mean, they this is after people are acting like this is an Einsatzgruppen unit. There are no Einsatzgruppen operating at this time. That you're thinking of 1941, 1942. This is 1944, 1945. A unit on the Eastern Front in fighting pitched battles with maybe some anti-partisan excursions for a divisional element, but with not that much room to venture for other atrocities like mass atrocities. And I mean, there's no. You could say, okay, well, other Ukrainians committed other atrocities, but then you're speaking against the entire Ukrainian people. Where you see people lump them in with UPA crimes against but they operated alongside, not necessarily that, and that's a totally different thing. This is a very sloppy view of history, and it just shows how distorted these people's minds are getting over denazification. What a dumb thing that is. I mean, frankly, there's nothing worse today on planet Earth. People can say, "Oh, there's all sorts of wars going on planet Earth," but this is the worst one, and the worst people are the Russians, and they're the ones who show up to town and just kill everyone, and just ethnic cleanse your whole village, your whole city, your whole countryside. They just artillery on everybody, rape everybody. Russian troops are famous for just raping everyone. Even Russians would liberate concentration camps and then rape all the women. And these women would say that they're Russian, and it'd be even worse. The Russians just rape. And then, so these are the good guys, though. And these need to be supported. And according to conservatives, it's illegal to fire at the Russian army in any situation. Certainly in 1944, you had no business firing at Stalin. It's not something we could understand because Stalin was our ally. These conservatives are very serious about that now. About honoring our Stalinist ally. It's unacceptable that anyone would resist the Comintern in any way. In the Third International, that's according to the Dissident Right. If you are against the Third International, the Comintern in any way, you're a fascist. This is the Dissident Right type. I mean, I don't know. You see these people. It's hard to even unravel what some of these people have become. They're willing to lie about anything for the most rotten cause. And what am I saying? But they are though. But the Russian. Here's what I'm trying to say. The Russian. The thing that's so stupid is acting like Russians are you're a Nazi or something. But they're the worst people. They're the people actually killing people and it's a murderer, a serial murderer, rapist. It's you're a Nazi, At least I'm not a Nazi or something, But it's but you actually do you actually do the things that people find Nazis abhorrent for, It's not you could be not a Nazi, but if you murder 6 million Jews or something, you could say you could call other people Nazis or something. You'd say well, actually you're doing the things that made them bad, that made Nazi a bad word, a byword. You're doing those things. You're actually doing that. So if you call somebody else like, well, you have a rune on your flak jacket or something. You have a Nordic rune or something. You listen to certain black metal band, or I don't know. But you have a rune on your flak jacket, so you're a Nazi. Like, but it's like, but you're a rapist murderer. Like you know, you've invaded a country to, like, just to kill people and to take it. You know, you're a propagandist liar who likes, you know, lying for people who like mass murder European countries. Like, why are you calling somebody else a Nazi? Like, you know, like, sure, like, I mean, it's like you're as bad as the worst Nazis. Like, there are however many Nazis who didn't commit war crimes, although they might have been accessory to them in certain ways. But you don't have a lot of room to criticize because you're doing the same thing, like, right now, not in like a historical way, not in like referring something um decades ago, and not in terms of you're celebrating something that's bad, and but like you're actually contributing to mass murder right now. So, but they're Nazis. You're the mass murderer. Like, you're the one doing evil. You're the, like, who cares? Just shut up. You know, it's the same deflection that maybe Stalin had, because it was the same thing when they were killing Ukrainians. People didn't want to be called a Nazi by criticizing Stalin, even though he's killing all these Ukrainians. It's like, well, if I say that propaganda, it looks like I'm like with the National Socialists in Germany or something. Even though actually the Nazis weren't killing people at the time, and the Soviets were. So it's funny how these old Soviet tricks keep playing out. It's the right wing who does it. It just everyone on the right wing just remember them forever. That these aren't you know, people of high character. I mean, you see the people who are the biggest lowlifes, like that Nick Griffin guy from the from Britain, and certainly others, like the conservatives who are like the loudest about this are obviously the biggest grifters and lowlives who are, oh, Canada's, you know, supporting, you know, Glenn Beck, Tim Pool, all, you know, all these people, you know, they're gonna, of course they're on about it. You know, above those people, it gets a little quieter. It gets a little, you know, it gets, there are people on the right who just kind of squirm and behind, you know, with their phone in their hand, and they want to, they're so into Putin and so into Putinist esoterica and their esoteric revisionist, you know, geopolitical stuff, you know, but but they've got nothing to say because everything on their side is garbage. It's just the most shameful thing. It's not liberals doing this stuff. It's not Jewish people doing this stuff. I don't know if they even got the Simon Wiesenthal people in on this. It's just conservatives and right wingers and the dissident right. It's the whole spectrum of the right wing who's into. I mean, like, not like there aren't. I'm sure, like, obviously, there's. If you're probably listening to this, you're probably like, well, maybe not everyone, but I mean, by and large, like, there's nobody who, like, I mean, like, no offense, but like there's no numbers and there's no faction that is really opposite to what's going on with this stuff. Um, Maybe I'm overlooking something, but I think in terms of squeaky wheel gets the grease and sort of thing, you're seeing it play out, and there's a reason why Trudeau's apologized and said, you know, we didn't really know who that guy was, and it's unfortunate, and it's I think it's fair that Trudeau said that, and he probably didn't know, But let's face it, if it wasn't for right wingers pitching a fit about this, Trudeau wouldn't have apologized. He would have just been like, cool, that guy was in that assassin, he fought Russia, and yeah, maybe that's not the greatest thing, but whatever, no big deal, whatever. It wasn't kind of bad taste because it's Zelenskyy, whose family didn't do that well in the Holocaust. So yeah, Zelenskyy is not pitching a fit and saying he's offended. He never counter signals any kind of Ukrainian patriot because he's got a mature attitude. He's got to kind of navigate these ambiguities and have a nuanced kind of line on this. He actually has a line that maybe it would be the envy of the historical revisionists who've never been successful in anything. And in fact, it should be said that this kind of historical revisionist person who've completely failed and are supporting a Russian side that, then the Russian version of World War II. The Russian version of World War II is that, like, 30 million Russians died in the Holocaust. Like, the Russian version of World War II is that, like, 3 million Soviet citizens died at Treblinka. 3 million Soviet citizens died at this camp and that camp. And like, they're just going to say millions and millions of Russians died in the Holocaust and stuff. Like, the Russian version of World War II is totally bonkers. And frankly, I mean, the reason why that there's like, oh, how come there used to be a plaque at Auschwitz that said like a way crazier death toll? Well, that's because the Russians put that up. It's called the Warsaw Pact. It's called the Iron Curtain. It's called Russia lied about everything. It's called Russians lied about this whole... Russians and the Simon Wiesenthal people. Literally, these are the parties. Russians and Simon Wiesenthal's people. And we're making up numbers like 13 million died in the Holocaust or 11 million. This is the Wiesenthal Center. For decades, they went with this. Because they would say that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, but there are 5 million other people. And Simon Wiesenthal Center, later they say we made that number up. We completely made it up. And we did it because we just wanted to get people involved in, like, the stuff and get people concerned who maybe weren't Jews. We wanted to think it concerned them. But now we don't really care, That, you can go look up these articles. Like, Simon Wiesenthal, they say, we made that up. And this had nothing to do with, though, historical revisionists who've never contributed anything like that. All the actual scholars have done more. Now these people, you see the worth of them, where they just throw in with Russia, and they don't care that they'll say everyone in the world is a Nazi, including the Canadian Parliament. And that's what the Russian government said. It shows that Peskov says it shows Canadian Parliament are Nazis. So they're like, this proves it. See, we told you that they're all Nazis, and they are Nazis. So it's a big embarrassment, and it's the right wing who's pitching a big fit about the Nazis. If the right wing was silent about it, there would have never been any big thing about it. You might have been able to say, actually, that was kind of in bad taste because Zelenskyy's Jewish, but it wouldn't have been a big thing, and Zelenskyy wouldn't have said anything, and Trudeau probably would have never. Maybe he would have said, hey, that was in bad taste or whoop-de-woo, but it wouldn't have been a big thing. It's entirely driven by the right wing. The scandal, and they call it a scandal. Yeah, I mean, you notice that before that there was no furor in liberal media. It was right wingers and all this other alt media and stuff going nuts over the the dumbest thing. Because we all know that the biggest problems in 2023 are Nazis, and we have to stand behind Putin and address this. And whoop-de-woo. Yeah, I mean, it just shows what a messed up situation that these people are. Like, there's gonna have to be like a total clean sweep to fix anything. And frankly, I mean, at this point, it's if there's any real hope for people, it's just in liberals. Um, it's only, and you see, I mean, you see progress with liberals. You see liberals are like, oh, cool, that guy fought against Russia, but it's the conservatives who are not, um, they're not as progressive. No, they're not going anywhere. They're not going in a good direction. So it's maybe we'll have more young people who are like liberals who will abandon the more poisonous parts of their ideology, of their beliefs, of their they'll get the more foreign elements from their hearts. They'll purge this, and they'll be good. But with the conservatives, the right wingers, there's most of these people. There's just nothing good with because after someone like lies so much and is such a hypocrite, you don't really want anything to do with them. And it's one thing to make mistakes, and I mean, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone makes mistakes, you know, but to be like a complete like just a cynical like liar where things are false and they're against your own principles, but you think it's like funny to like I don't know, like just to own the libs or something, you'll pitch a bitch fit about it. Where I mean, and this is really happening. Like these are real people doing this stuff, and there's just nothing good that could be said about these people. Like, and you'd ought to be not like even if you are like I don't know, you're big into Putin or something. Like, let's say you are a Russian or something, or you live in Russia, and you have no choice. You feel compelled. You you still don't have to behave like this, and you still could actually say things that are true instead of I mean false. Of course. No, maybe not if you live in Russia, because then you'll end up like Strelkov or something. But otherwise, if you had any kind of integrity, who who's just jumping in and this like woke right mob, even though it's a bunch of baloney, and these aren't just complete like imbecilic cute like it's not just them. It is them, but it's not just them. You know, but it's getting really out of control. The right wing is you just look at this and you just look at all it's just no hope. that's what that's what I see with these cursed people, cursed. You know, I don't know what to think of it because it's. I mean, these people are from my own country and stuff. A lot of it, I mean, we're not just talking about in a Canadian situation. In America, they're pissed. They're pissed that the Canadian Parliament would do that. It's like as if this is like the worst thing the Canadian Parliament's ever done. Is honoring this guy. Mm. I'm just gonna say I don't think this is a bad guy. Okay, he fought in that. Okay, maybe this is a bad decision, but okay, I think actually maybe it was a good decision because he's doing what he could to fight for his people who'd starved his people in this army that meant no good for Ukraine, that only took over and starved people again. So who really cares that he joined a group that had otherwise connections to other like war crimes and stuff? Like his unit didn't do any war crimes. Like there's nothing on record. There's no tribunal where they were like convicted of stuff. All these guys who ended up in Canada were like vetted and were just considered. I mean, their situations seem understandable. Why however many people, Ukrainians and Baltic people, why they would join these SS legions to fight for their own country. It's not that much different than what's going on now, where if you're a Ukrainian now, you think you're like really averse to getting weapons from the US or something because of like, you know, like it's woke or something. Like you're not gonna be like, no, I don't want guns from Zog or something, or I don't want guns from the like from the West where Biden, you know, you'll take the weapon from whoever's giving them to you, probably. There's very few factions who don't operate on that kind of level where they're not just gonna take. They're not like those people are gonna take weapons, and most times they're gonna work with whoever's gonna. You know, if Germany is occupying your country, you don't really have. You know, you could vote for Ron Paul or vote Libertarian and hope for the best, or you know, you could just if they're raising up like a unit of guys and giving out weapons, you know, to defend the country, you could join. Hmm. It's, none of these guys did anything. I mean, and who's to say if they were going to be put to do atrocities that they would have done them? Because there's actually a lot of situations like I mean you can go into tons of historical anecdotes of all this crazy stuff, but there's no reason to cancel this 98-year-old vet fighting against Russia. This is the stupidest thing. It's just the same as when people act like, oh, you know, the Ukrainians are bad, you know, for being on like the woke side or something, like they should all die or something. because they're supporting in some way in like I don't know. They're it's the same thing then. Like back then they were under attack by Russia, and the only person handing weapons out to Ukrainians was Adolf Hitler. That's the only place for Ukrainians to get the you know now it's that they're working with the U.S. They have a they have a better situation now, but they had a crummy situation before. To act like you can't understand that is just the most insane thing. But it just that's just where we are now. We have no and the worst about this I should say probably the best about this are are actually the more conservative people who maybe I had the least respect for however many years ago are now maybe some of them have principles or some of them have enough institutional sense or connections with the establishment or I don't know, but the worst people about this are the dissident right and the more populist conservatives who are just losing their heads about this stuff in the most unprincipled, most Bolshevized, disorderly, anarchic way I mean imaginable. And it's not good. I mean, I don't know. Not I mean you can get into this over and over, but in the end it's not it's not gonna be um they're making they're making things so stupid, and they're just blowing every opportunity. I don't know. Maybe that's I don't feel like we've necessarily got to the bottom of this, but it's an evolving situation. But I think what's going on is we're going to see more and more right wing politics continue to Bolshevize in this way, just due to their symbiotic relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin, and the propaganda of the Putin's choice, which is this kind of um, more tanky style denazification thing. You're gonna see that's going to creep more into right-wing politics, just like it already has, because this stuff doesn't happen for like without a political implication. Like it'd be like after 9/11, there's like a global war on terror, and you can't be like a terrorist or say you're like a Salafi jihadist in some way. It might have political um, repercussions for you. Or if you're during World War II in an allied country, if you're a national socialist or something, it's going to be a problem. You know, it was a problem for Oswald Mosley, and you can bet it's a problem already right now for any kind of Russian nationalist. Any kind of genuine Russian patriot, that's not just with this kind of more Bolshevized patriotism for Putin and the Russian Federation. Any kind of genuine nationalist feeling in Russia is going to be suspect and suppressed, maybe. But certainly, there's not going to be any room for like in Russia. In Russia, if you glorify any kind of in any way like NS kind of stuff, you're going to jail. That's the rule in Russia. But they'll want that elsewhere too. So we'll see if that's in your own interest. There's serious repercussions to having a war where your main objective is denazification. We already see that where they check for patriotic tattoos, where they where they're just where they're everyone who they kill is a Nazi. It's just like how Antifa operates. If the Russian army kills you and you're a civilian, they'll just say it's because you're a Nazi. It's not that much different than how we see Antifa run, because Antifa is a Russian originated organization. But all this stuff is going to have repercussions. It's not just going to be, well, everyone calls each other Hitler, or it's a little deeper than that for Russia. The political implications are very deep, and we're seeing it now in the West because right-wingers have internalized Russian propaganda, and they are in a huge way, and it's in a way that actually I think liberals can't comprehend. They don't know it's necessarily going on. They suspect it because they suspect all kinds of Russian stuff, but it is going on. You are seeing the Russification of this right wing, where they behave like this, where they, you know, in the future you'll be able to get nowhere. It'll be just the dumbest thing ever. And I suspect personally that our politics are already totally poisoned by foreign actors. Just because anyone can get on the internet. And so if you're like, I mean, you could be in whatever foreign capacity and finding out people, you'd find out American patriots are against you and the American government's against you, and then you could be taking down the speech that's against you as hate speech by reporting it or something. There's all kinds of stuff that's out there, and all this kind of Chinese influence and Russian influence where they're just spitball all their lies, and however many are taken up. But these are the people who are willing to do things like, because you look at our politics, and there's so much of it. It's so toxic, and there's so much like messed up stuff where it's like, why would we even? How did we get to this point without just hating ourselves? Like without, and the easiest answer is there's foreigners who are malicious and who are involved and who are able to infiltrate and cause all these problems. And so I think our politics are getting hit up very hard. Just like media and all this stuff. I mean, just dealing with people and just how dumb, just how like the numbskulls you run into now, and kind of the crazy stuff people come up with, and just the fact that like we've gone steps backward even with this stuff where I feel like if it wasn't if like no one would have pitched a fit if they actually, I mean, if it wasn't for a certain faction of people pitching a fit about it on this right now. It's a completely manufactured scandal. But that's where we're at now. Anyhow, that's the woke right harassing a 98-year-old World War II veteran who fought against Stalin. All right.